The great hall of Harmonia Prime stretched upward like a cathedral made of starlight. Thousands of delegates from hundreds of species filled the curved seats, their forms ranging from serpentine to crystalline to shapes that had no name in any human language. Floating platforms carried the most important representatives to the center, where a podium of pure white stone waited for speakers. Ambassador Yoon Nari stood on one such platform, her hands steady at her sides. She wore the formal black suit of Earth's diplomatic corps, simple and unadorned, compared to the flowing robes and glittering jewelry of the other ambassadors. She had practiced her speech for weeks. She had memorized every word, every pause, every gesture. 300 years. That was how long humanity had been part of the Galactic Council. 300 years of provisional membership. Of being told to wait, to prove themselves, to earn their place among the stars. Today, she would ask for that to end. High Arbiter Telos, leader of the Velthari species and chairman of the council, sat on his elevated throne at the far end of the hall. His silver skin reflected the lights above, and his 4 eyes watched everything with cold patience. The Velthari had founded the council 12,000 years ago. To them, 3 centuries was nothing, a blink. Nari stepped to the podium. The hall fell silent. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice carried by invisible speakers to every corner of the vast chamber. "I come before you today to formally request that humanity be granted full membership status, with all associated rights, including equal voting power in council decisions." She paused, letting the words settle. For 300 years, humanity has served this council faithfully. We have maintained relay stations in the Outer Rim, when no other species would take those posts. We have run medical supplies to colony worlds at cost, asking nothing in return. We have mapped the nebula corridors and shared those maps freely. We have sent our doctors to cure plagues, our engineers to repair stations, our teachers to frontier worlds where children had no schools. Nari looked around the hall. Some delegates listened politely. Others whispered to their neighbors. A few did not bother to hide their amusement. "We do not ask for special treatment," she continued. "We ask only for what we have earned. The right to be heard, the right to vote, the right to be seen as equals." She finished and stepped back from the podium. For a moment, there was silence. Then the laughter began. It started with the Kethrani delegation, their sharp teeth flashing as they chuckled. It spread to the Silvani, whose musical voices made even mockery sound beautiful. Soon, half the hall was laughing, some openly, others behind their hands. High Arbiter Telos raised one long-fingered hand, and the laughter slowly died. "Ambassador Yoon," he said, his voice like wind through ancient trees. "The Council appreciates humanity's enthusiasm. Your species has indeed performed many useful services during your provisional period." He leaned forward, his 4 eyes narrowing. "But you must understand. The Velthari waited 4,000 years for full membership. The Kethrani, 3,000. The Silvani, 2,000. You have been with us for a mere 3 centuries. In the life of the galaxy, you are still infants." More laughter rippled through the hall. "Perhaps in another 1,000 years," Telos continued, "when humanity has proven it can control its violent impulses, its emotional instability, its tendency toward self-destruction, perhaps, then we can discuss this matter again." He waved his hand dismissively. "Until that time, your request is denied. You may return to your seat." Nari did not move. She stood at the podium, looking at the High Arbiter. Her face showed nothing, no anger, no shame, no hurt. She had expected this. She had prepared for it. But she had also prepared for what came next. Slowly, carefully, she gathered her documents from the podium. She placed them in her case and closed it with a soft click. "We understand," she said. Her voice was calm, clear, and carried to every corner of the hall. "We will no longer burden this council with our presence." She stepped off the platform and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. High Arbiter Telos frowned. Ambassador Yoon, what do you mean by that statement? Nari stopped at the door. She turned back to face the hall one last time. Exactly what I said, High Arbiter. Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. All human personnel will evacuate Council space within 72 hours. All human ships, stations, and assets will be recalled to Earth territory. The hall erupted in confused murmurs. This is unprecedented, Telos said. You cannot simply leave. We can, Nari replied. We are provisional members. We have no binding treaties, no obligations beyond what we chose to give. She paused. And now we choose to stop giving. She opened the door. Goodbye, High Arbiter. I hope you find someone else to maintain your relay stations. Then she was gone. Captain Park Do-hyun was waiting for her in the docking bay, standing at attention beside the diplomatic shuttle. He was a tall man, with gray at his temples, and steady eyes that had seen too many battles. He had commanded Earth's diplomatic escort fleet for 15 years, and he had never liked the Council. Ambassador, he said as she approached. How did it go? As expected. Nari replied. She handed him her case. We're leaving. All of us. 72 hours. Do-hyun nodded. He had already received the orders from Earth. The moment Nari walked out of that hall, the signal had been sent. Every human in Council space was packing their bags. No second thoughts? He asked. Nari looked back at Harmonia Prime, the great station that served as the Council's capital. Its towers sparkled with lights from 1,000 worlds. They laughed at us, she said quietly. For 300 years, we gave them everything we had, and they laughed. She turned away and walked toward the shuttle. No, she said. No second thoughts. 72 hours later, the last human ship crossed out of Council space. There were no threats, no ultimatums, no dramatic declarations of war. Humanity simply left. The Council barely noticed. Trade Minister Vorath of the Kethrani even joked about it at a dinner party. Good riddance to the primitives, he said, raising his glass. Now we can conduct real business, without their emotional outbursts. The other guests laughed and agreed. High Arbiter Telos did not attend the party. He sat alone in his chambers, staring at a report on his desk. It was a list of all the services humanity had provided to the Council over 3 centuries. It was a very long list. He read it once, then set it aside. They will come back, he said to himself. They always do. Humans are too weak to survive alone. They need us. He believed that completely. He was wrong. In the months that followed, the Council went about its business. Meetings were held. Resolutions were passed. Trade continued. Wars were threatened and avoided. Life went on as it always had. And slowly, quietly, without anyone noticing, things began to fall apart. A relay station went dark in the outer rim. A medical shipment was delayed by 3 weeks. A frontier colony sent an emergency request for engineers. No one answered. The threads were unraveling. But the Council did not see it. Not yet. Councillor Mira of the Silvani was one of the few who noticed. She was old, even by Silvani standards, and she had served on the Council for 800 years. She remembered the day humanity first arrived, so young, so eager, so desperate to prove themselves. She had liked them. Now she pulled up old records, searching for something she could not name. A feeling. And in those records, she began to see the truth. What have we done? She whispered to herself. No one heard her. No one was listening. 6 months passed after humanity left Council space. In that time, the great wheels of galactic civilization continued to turn. Ships crossed the void between stars. Merchants traded goods worth more than entire planets. Diplomats argued about borders and treaties. Everything seemed normal. But normal was starting to crack. Trade Minister Vorath sat in his office on Kethra Prime, staring at numbers he did not like. His shipping consortium, the largest in Council space, had reported a 15% drop in efficiency. 15%. In 6 months. Explain this, he demanded, jabbing a clawed finger at the report. His assistant, a nervous young Kethrani named Torval, swallowed hard. Minister, it appears to be related to the nebula corridors. Our ships are experiencing delays, accidents, losses. The routes have become difficult. End quote. Difficult? They have been the same routes for a century. Yes, Minister. But the maps we were using, they were human maps. Proprietary charts that their navigators had developed over decades. When they left, they took the maps with them. Vorath felt his blood run cold. Then get new maps. Send our own ships to chart the corridors. Torval hesitated. We have tried, Minister. We have lost 4 ships already. The corridors are more dangerous than we knew. The humans apparently found safe paths through regions we did not even know existed. Without their charts. He trailed off. Vorath slammed his fist on the desk. Then find another way. I will not lose profits because some primitives took their toys and went home, but there was no other way. The nebula corridors were the fastest routes between the core worlds and the outer colonies. Without safe passage through them, shipping times doubled. Costs tripled. Profits vanished. Vorath was still screaming at his assistant when the first reports came in from the outer rim. Relay Station 17 had gone dark. It was a small station, barely worth mentioning in the great scheme of things. It sat on the edge of Council space, a lonely outpost that boosted communication signals between the core worlds and the frontier colonies. For 200 years, it had functioned perfectly. No one had thought about who maintained it. A Council repair ship was dispatched to investigate. When it arrived, the crew found the station intact but empty. The human technicians who had lived there for generations were gone. They had left everything clean and organized, with detailed notes about every system on the station. The notes were in standard Galactic, easy to read. The repairs they described were not. We need specialists, the repair crew reported. This technology is not like ours. It has been modified, improved, adapted in ways we do not understand. We cannot fix it. The Council sent more specialists. They could not fix it either. Relay Station 17 remained dark. Communication with 3 frontier colonies became sporadic, then stopped entirely. Counselor Mira watched these events unfold with growing alarm. She requested a meeting with High Arbiter Telos, who granted her 10 minutes of his time. High Arbiter, she said, standing before his throne. I believe we have made a serious mistake. The departure of humanity is causing damage throughout our systems. We must reach out to them, attempt to negotiate their return. Telos looked at her with his 4 cold eyes. Counselor Mira, I respect your long service to this body, but you have always been sentimental about the humans. They were useful, yes, but they were not essential. We managed for 12,000 years before they arrived. We will manage without them now, but the evidence is coincidence. A few technical difficulties. A bad quarter for shipping. These things happen. They are not caused by the absence of one minor species. He waved his hand. Boarding. End quote. I will not discuss this further. The humans chose to leave. Let them face the consequences of that choice. We will not beg them to return. Mira wanted to argue, but she knew it was pointless. Telos had made up his mind, and his pride would not let him change it. She left his chambers and went to her own office, where she continued her research. She pulled records from every department of the Council, searching for patterns. And everywhere she looked, she found humans. Humans who ran the communication relays no one else wanted to staff. Humans who served as translators for species whose languages were too complex for automated systems. Humans who worked as emergency responders on stations throughout the Council, because they were willing to run toward danger while others ran away. Humans who taught school on frontier worlds, because no other species would live in such remote and primitive conditions. Humans who worked in hospitals, in laboratories, in engineering bays, always in the background. always doing the jobs that were too hard, too boring, too dangerous, or too poorly paid for anyone else. Mira had never noticed before. No one had. The humans had never complained, never demanded recognition, never asked for anything except the chance to be useful. And now they were gone. On the planet Sylvan IV, a distant colony world of Mira's own people, a plague broke out. It was a rare disease, one that had not been seen in centuries. The local doctors had no idea how to treat it. They sent an emergency request to the council for assistance. They needed a specialist, someone who had studied the pathogen. The council searched its records. There was only one expert in the quadrant who had researched this disease: Dr. Kim Ji-woo, a human xenobiologist who had spent 20 years studying rare Sylvani illnesses. Dr. Kim was on Earth. The council sent a message to the human government, requesting her assistance. The message was polite, but urgent. Thousands of lives were at stake. Earth's response came within hours. It was equally polite. Dr. Kim Ji-woo is no longer employed in council space. Her research and medical records are her personal property and are not available to the Galactic Council. We wish the people of Sylvan IV well in their recovery. That was all. Mira tried personal channels. She knew people who might know how to reach Dr. Kim directly. She begged. She pleaded. She offered money, favors, anything. It did no good. "I'm sorry," Dr. Kim said in a recorded message that finally reached Mira through back channels. "I spent 20 years serving the council. I cured 11 diseases that would have killed millions. And I was never given a laboratory of my own, never published in council journals, never even thanked by anyone except the patients themselves. I am tired, counselor. I want to rest. I want to go home." The message ended. On Sylvan IV, the plague spread. Without Dr. Kim's research, the local doctors worked blindly, trying one treatment after another. Some worked partially. Most did not. By the time a cure was finally developed, 2,000 Sylvani had died. Mira attended the memorial service on Sylvan IV. She stood among her people and listened to them weep for their dead. And she knew that those deaths were not the fault of the humans who had left. They were the fault of the council that had driven them away. She returned to Harmonia Prime with a new determination. She would make the council see the truth, even if she had to drag them to it by force. But when she arrived, she found that things had gotten worse. The Vorun hegemony, a hostile empire beyond council space, had begun probing the border defenses. 3 outposts had been attacked. 2 had fallen. "We need reinforcements," the border commanders reported. "Where are the human mercenary fleets?" They always responded to these incursions before, but there were no human fleets. Those mercenaries had actually been Earth's contribution to collective security, unofficial, but essential. And they were gone. The borders were weakening. The communications were failing. The trade routes were crumbling. And in his chambers, High Arbiter Telos still refused to admit that anything was wrong. The humans were nothing, he told himself every night before he slept. We do not need them. We never needed them. But the darkness was spreading. And soon, even he would not be able to ignore it. On Earth, in a quiet office in the capital city, Admiral Choi Eun-ji watched the long-range sensors. She saw the chaos unfolding in council space. She saw the border attacks, the failing stations, the desperate messages. A young officer stood beside her. "Admiral," he said, "should we not help them? We could send ships, supplies, doctors. We could make a difference." Eun-ji did not look away from the screens. "They told us we were not ready," she said. "They told us we were primitives who needed to prove ourselves. So let them prove that they can survive without us." The young officer was silent. "I do not enjoy this," Eun-ji added quietly. "But some lessons can only be learned through pain, and they have not learned yet." She turned off the screens and walked away. The council would have to fall further before it could rise again, and humanity would be watching, waiting. 2 years had passed since humanity left the Galactic Council. What had started as small cracks had become deep wounds. The great civilization that had stood for 12,000 years was bleeding, and it could not stop. The Vorun hegemony had grown bold. Their ships crossed the border every week now, not just probing but attacking. They destroyed outposts. They raided colonies. They took prisoners and slaves. The council sent fleets to stop them, but those fleets were designed for parades and ceremonies, not for real war. They lost. 3 border stations fell in a single month. 10,000 council citizens were killed or captured, and the Vorun kept coming. On the planet Kethra Prime, Prince Zareth walked through the halls of the royal palace with a growing sense of dread. He was young, barely past his first century, and he was heir to the Kethrani throne. His father, King Voreth, had ruled for 300 years and had grown fat and lazy on the profits of his shipping empire. But those profits were gone now. The nebula corridors remained death traps without human maps. The shipping consortium that had made the Kethrani rich was failing, and the war with the Vorun was draining what little remained. Zareth had been raised to believe that the Kethrani were the greatest merchants in the galaxy. He had been taught that humans were primitive, emotional, unreliable, useful as servants, but nothing more. Now he was beginning to doubt everything he had been taught. He used his royal access codes to enter the classified archives of the council. He searched for records about humanity, about their contributions, about what they had really done during their 3 centuries of membership. What he found shocked him. Humanity had been subsidizing the council economy for over 100 years. They had sold goods below cost, provided services for free, taken on debts that other species refused to pay. They had quietly kept the whole system running while receiving nothing but contempt in return. And their technology, the technology that the council had mocked as primitive, had actually been deliberately simplified. Human engineers had designed systems that other species could maintain without specialized training. They had made their equipment easy to repair, easy to understand, easy to use. They had done this on purpose, to help, and the council had laughed at them for it. Zareth found medical records that showed humanity had cured 11 major plagues during their membership. He found engineering reports that showed human technicians had saved dozens of stations from critical failures. He found military analyses that showed human mercenary fleets had stopped at least 4 major invasions before they could threaten the core worlds. None of this had ever been publicly acknowledged. None of it had been thanked. The humans had simply done the work and asked for nothing in return, until the day they asked for one thing, equality, and were laughed out of the hall. Zareth closed the archive and sat in silence for a long time. He understood now why the humans had left. He only wished he had understood sooner. On Harmonia Prime, there lived an old man named Holt. He was one of the only humans who had remained in council space after the departure. He had married a Velthari woman 50 years ago, and they had built a life together on the Great Station. When the order came to evacuate, he had chosen to stay with his wife. He was a station master, responsible for a small section of the lower levels. It was not important work, but he did it well. He always had. Now the council investigators came to his door. They wanted to understand what had happened. They wanted to know why humanity had left, what they had been thinking, what they wanted. Holt invited them in and served them tea. He was polite and calm. He had nothing to hide. "Why did your people leave?" the lead investigator asked. Holt thought about the question for a moment. "Because you did not want us," he said simply. "You wanted our work but not us. You wanted our skills but not our voices. You wanted us to serve but never to belong." He sipped his tea. "So we decided to show you what our absence would mean, but the damage this has caused." "Yes," Holt agreed. "There has been damage. Stations failing. Colonies isolated. People dying. You are learning what we were worth." He set down his cup. "You did not want us as equals, so we decided to show you what equality would have meant." The investigators had no response to that. They thanked him for his time and left. Their report would be filed and ignored, just like all the others. Back on Earth, Admiral Choi Unji stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching long-range sensor data scroll across her screens. The situation in Council space was deteriorating faster than anyone had predicted. The Varun hegemony was preparing a major offensive. Intelligence suggested they would strike at the Council core worlds within months. General Yu Minho stood beside her, studying the same data. "They cannot win," he said. "Their fleets are ceremonial. Their soldiers have not fought a real war in millennia. The Vorun will destroy them." "I know," Unji replied. "And when the Council falls, the Vorun will turn their attention to us." "I know that too." Minho was quiet for a moment. "Then we must help them. Not for their sake, for ours. If we let the Vorun conquer Council space, we will face them alone." Minho. Unji nodded slowly. She had already reached the same conclusion. But she was not ready to act on it. Not yet. "They have not asked," she said. "When they ask, really ask. Not just demand. Then we will decide. And if they are too proud to ask?" Unji looked at the stars on her view screen. Somewhere out there, trillions of beings were going about their lives, unaware that their civilization was collapsing around them. "Then they will learn what pride costs," she said. "And if they are lucky, they will learn it before it is too late." On Harmonia Prime, Counselor Mira had gathered a small group of like-minded delegates. They called themselves the Reconciliation Faction, and their goal was simple: bring humanity back. But they were fighting against centuries of prejudice, and they were losing. "The humans were useful," one elder Velthari told Mira, "but they were never essential. We will adapt. We will overcome. We always have. We are dying." Mira replied, "Can you not see it? Every day, we lose more ground to the Vorun. Every day, more systems fail. More colonies go silent. More of our people suffer. And for what? For pride? For the privilege of saying we did not need help from primitives?" The elder walked away without answering. Mira returned to her office and sat in the dark. She was 800 years old. She had seen empires rise and fall, wars begin and end, species evolve and go extinct. She had thought she understood how the galaxy worked. Now she realized she had understood nothing. She thought about the humans she had known over the centuries. The young ones, so eager to prove themselves. The old ones, so tired of never being seen. The doctors and engineers and teachers who had given everything and received nothing. She thought about Dr. Kim Ji-woo, whose research could have saved 2,000 lives on Sylvan IV. She thought about Ambassador Yoon Nari, standing alone in that great hall while the council laughed at her. She thought about the human saying she had once heard, "You don't know what you have until it's gone." The council had not known, and now they were learning. But some lessons came too late. In his private chambers, High Arbiter Telos sat alone, staring at reports he no longer wanted to read. The border was collapsing. The economy was failing. The colonies were revolting. And everywhere, there were problems that humans used to solve quietly and without recognition. For the first time in his 1,200-year life, Telos felt afraid. He had ruled the council for 3 centuries. He had been taught from birth that the Velthari were the wisest species in the galaxy, that their judgment was beyond question, that lesser races existed to serve them. Now he was beginning to wonder if everything he had been taught was wrong. He pulled up the records of humanity's final council session. He watched the recording of Ambassador Yoon Nari standing at the podium, making her request. He watched himself dismiss her with contempt, and he watched her walk away. "We will no longer burden this council with our presence." Those words echoed in his mind. He turned off the recording and sat in silence. Outside his window, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere among them, humanity waited, watching, judging, and Telos knew, in the depths of his ancient heart, that they would not come back on their own. He would have to ask, but the words stuck in his throat. He could not do it. Not yet. Not until there was no other choice. 3 years after humanity's departure, the Vorun hegemony launched its final offensive. 1,000 warships crossed the border in a single wave, their dark hulls blotting out the stars. They came not to raid or probe, but to conquer. The Council fleets met them at the Battle of Kareth Station. It was supposed to be a decisive stand, a show of strength that would turn back the invaders and restore confidence in the Council's power. It was a massacre. The Council ships were beautiful. They gleamed with gold and silver, their hulls decorated with the symbols of 100 species. They had been built to impress, to project majesty and authority across the galaxy. They had not been built to fight. The Vorun ships were ugly. They were covered in scars and patches. Their weapons crude, but powerful. They had been built by a species that had fought for everything it had, that had clawed its way up from nothing through blood and fire. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, 2/3 of the Council fleet was destroyed. The survivors fled in disorder, leaving Kareth Station to fall. The Vorun did not stop. They pushed deeper into Council space, taking system after system. Colonies that had stood for millennia were conquered in days. Populations that had never known war learned what it meant to lose. And still, the Council could not stop them. On the Velthari homeworld, High Arbiter Telos stood on a balcony and watched his world burn. Vorun ships had broken through the planetary defenses 3 days ago. Now they bombarded the cities from orbit, reducing ancient monuments to rubble. The great libraries of Velthar, containing 12,000 years of knowledge, were ash. Telos was 1,200 years old. He had been taught since childhood that the Velthari were the masters of the galaxy, that their wisdom and power were beyond challenge. He had believed it completely. Now he stood in the ruins of that belief and felt nothing but despair. His advisors came to him with reports. The homeworld was lost. The fleet was shattered. The colonies were falling one by one. If something did not change, the Velthari would be extinct within a year. "What do we do?" they asked him. "High Arbiter, what do we do?" Telos had no answer. For the first time in his life, he had no answer. That night, alone in his chambers, he made the decision he had avoided for 3 years. He sat down at his communication terminal and composed a message to Earth. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. "To the government of humanity," he wrote. "I am High Arbiter Telos of the Velthari, Chairman of the Galactic Council. I write to you in our darkest hour. The Vorun hegemony has invaded our space. Our fleets are destroyed. Our worlds are falling. We face extinction." He stopped, his fingers trembling over the keys. "I know that we have wronged you. I know that we dismissed your contributions, mocked your requests, and drove you away with our arrogance. I have no excuse for this. I can only say that I was blind, and now I see." He took a deep breath. "We need your help. We will give you anything you ask in return: full membership, council seats, territorial concessions, anything. But please, I beg you, do not let our people die because of my pride." He sent the message before he could change his mind. Then he sat in the dark and waited. On Earth, the message arrived at the Parliament building in the capital city at 3 in the morning. It was flagged as priority and routed immediately to the Emergency Council. General Yu Minho was the first to read it, then Admiral Choi Unji, then the Prime Minister and the rest of the Council. They sat in silence for a long time after finishing. "Well," Minho said finally, "they are begging now." "They are dying," Unji corrected. "There is a difference." The Prime Minister, an elderly woman named Seo Hayung, looked around the table. "We need to decide what to do. Quickly. Every hour we delay, more of them die." The debate that followed was long and bitter. Some argued for revenge. "They laughed at us," one general said. "They humiliated us for 3 centuries. Let them burn. Let them see what their arrogance has cost them." Others argued for caution. "If we help them, we will be pulled into a war that is not ours. Our people will die for species that never respected us. Why should we sacrifice ourselves for them?" But most of the council took a different view. If we let the council fall, Admiral Unji said, the Vorun will not stop there. They will come for us next. We will face them alone, without allies, without support. We cannot allow that. More than that, General Minho added, this is our chance to show the galaxy what we truly are. Not conquerors, not avengers, but people who help those in need, even those who have hurt us. The Prime Minister nodded slowly. We will help them, she said. But they must understand what we were, and what they lost. They must acknowledge it publicly, before the entire galaxy. The Council agreed. A response was sent to High Arbiter Telos. We will consider your request. First, send a delegation to Earth. We have things to discuss. Counselor Mira led the delegation. She had fought for this moment for 3 years, and she was not going to let it slip away. She brought representatives from every major species, Velthari, Kethrani, Silvani, and a dozen others. They traveled to Earth in a small ship, unarmed and unescorted, a gesture of trust and humility. They expected to land at a military base or a government facility. Instead, they were directed to a city, a human city, full of human people going about their human lives. The delegation walked through streets lined with shops and restaurants. They saw children playing in parks, students walking to schools, workers commuting to jobs. They saw art on the walls, and music in the air, and laughter on every corner. They saw a civilization that was alive and vibrant and utterly unlike anything they had imagined. You are not primitive, Mira whispered as she walked. You never were. Their human guide, a young woman from the foreign ministry named Han Somi, smiled at her. No, she agreed. We just never boasted. The delegation was taken to the Parliament building, where they met with the Prime Minister and the Council. There were no threats, no demands for revenge, no gloating over the Council's fall. There was only a simple question. Do you understand now? Prime Minister Seo asked. Do you understand what we were? What we gave you? What you threw away? Mira stepped forward. She was 800 years old, and she had never bowed to anyone. She bowed now. We understand, she said. We were fools. We saw your service and called it servitude. We saw your kindness and called it weakness. We saw your patience and called it stupidity. We were wrong about all of it. She straightened and looked the Prime Minister in the eye. We cannot undo what was done. We can only ask for the chance to make it right. Please help us. And let us learn to be worthy of that help. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Prime Minister Seo nodded. We will help you, she said. Not for payment. Not for power. But because you need us. And we were raised to help those in need. She paused. Even those who hurt us. Mira felt tears on her face. She did not wipe them away. Thank you, she said. Thank you. The delegation returned to Harmonia Prime with the news. Earth would send its fleets. Earth would send its doctors and engineers and soldiers. Earth would save the Council. But they would never forget what had happened. And neither would anyone else. High Arbiter Telos received the report in his ruined chambers on the Velthari homeworld. He read it 3 times, unable to believe it. They were coming. After everything, they were coming. He set down the report and closed his 4 eyes. I do not deserve this, he said to himself. None of us deserve this. But the humans were coming anyway. That was the difference between them and everyone else. That was why they had always been stronger than anyone knew. And finally, the human fleet arrived at Harmonia Prime without fanfare. There were no dramatic announcements, no demands for surrender, no ultimatums delivered to the enemy. The ships simply appeared at the edge of the system, hundreds of them, their hulls dark and scarred from decades of silent service. At their head was the flagship Silent Dawn, commanded by Captain Park Do-hyun. He stood on the bridge, looking at the tactical display. Harmonia Prime, the great station that served as the Council's capital, was surrounded by Vorun warships. The invaders had taken everything else. This was their final target. Once it fell, the council would be finished. "Captain," his tactical officer reported, "the Voron fleet outnumbers us 3-1. They have heavier weapons and stronger shields. On paper, we cannot win this battle." Do-hyun smiled slightly. "We have never won anything on paper. Send the signal. All ships, attack formation, and someone tell the Voron commander that he has one chance to withdraw. If he takes it, we will let him go. If he does not, he let the sentence hang." The message was sent. The Voron commander, a warlord named Krath, responded with laughter. "Humans," he sneered over the open channel. "We have heard of you. The servants, the doormats. You clean toilets and bandage wounds, while real warriors conquer. Go home, little primitives." "This is not your fight." Do-hyun's smile faded. "You should have taken the offer," he said. Then he gave the order to attack. The Battle of Harmonia Prime would be studied in military academies for centuries. The Voron had numbers, firepower, and the confidence of 100 victories. The humans had something else. They had fought before, not in ceremonies or parades, but in real wars, against real enemies. They had defended borders that no one else would defend, protected colonies that no one else would protect, held lines that everyone else had abandoned. They had learned how to fight with less against more, how to win battles that should have been impossible, and they had learned how to work together. Human ships moved as a single organism, each captain anticipating the others without needing orders. They exploited weaknesses in the Voron formation, concentrated their fire on critical targets, and then scattered before the enemy could respond. They used tactics the Voron had never seen, maneuvers that seemed reckless until they worked perfectly. Within an hour, the Voron flagship was crippled. Within 3 hours, half their fleet was destroyed. Within 6 hours, the survivors were running for the border. Warlord Krath tried to rally his ships for a final stand. He screamed at them over the radio, calling them cowards and weaklings, but his ships kept running. They had seen enough. Captain Do-hyun watched the enemy retreat and felt no joy. Victory in battle was never something to celebrate. It only meant that the dying was over. "Send rescue ships to the enemy debris fields," he ordered. "Pick up survivors, treat their wounded, and then send them home." His officers looked at him in surprise. "Captain, they are our enemies. They killed millions of council citizens." "I know what they did," Do-hyun replied. "But we do not leave people to die in the void. Not even enemies. That is not who we are." The rescue ships launched. The Voron survivors were collected, treated, and sent back to their own space. Many of them could not understand why. Some of them would spend the rest of their lives trying to figure it out. In the days that followed, human forces swept through council space, driving out the Voron from every system they had taken. It was not easy. 11 days of hard fighting, thousands of casualties, countless acts of courage and sacrifice. But they won. On the 11th day, the last Voron ship crossed back over the border. The invasion was over. The council was saved. The celebration on Harmonia Prime lasted for 3 days. Species that had not spoken to each other in centuries embraced in the corridors. Flags and banners from 100 worlds flew side by side. Music and laughter filled the great halls that had so recently echoed with the sounds of war. And everywhere, there were humans, not being celebrated, not demanding thanks, just helping, treating the wounded, repairing the damaged stations, feeding the hungry, comforting the grieving, doing the same work they had always done, quietly and without recognition. High Arbiter Telos watched them from his balcony on the restored council chamber. His homeworld was in ruins, his people scattered, his pride shattered. But he was alive. They were all alive. Because of the humans, he had prepared a speech for this moment. He had planned to offer humanity the chairmanship of the council, to give them the highest position of power as payment for what they had done. When Ambassador Yoon Nari arrived, he made the offer. She refused. "We do not want to rule you," she said, standing before him in the same black suit she had worn 3 years ago. "We never did. We just wanted to be seen." Telos did not understand. "Then what do you want? Name it. Anything." Nari looked at him for a long moment. "We want to be equals," she said. "Not above you. Not below you. Beside you. Partners in building a better galaxy. That is all we ever wanted." Telos felt something break inside him. All his life, he had believed that power was the only thing that mattered, that species were ranked by their ability to dominate others. He had never imagined that someone could want something else. "You shall have it," he said. "Full membership, equal votes, everything you asked for 3 years ago." Nari nodded. "And one more thing. Name it. Remember this. Remember what happened when you dismissed us. Remember what it cost you. And never let it happen again to us, or to anyone else." Telos bowed his head. "I will remember," he said. "We all will." The council was reformed in the weeks that followed. Humanity took its place among the elder species, not as servants or supplicants, but as partners. New rules were written to ensure that no species would ever be dismissed or overlooked again. The mistakes of the past would not be repeated. Counselor Mira worked closely with the humans on these reforms. She had spent 3 years fighting for this moment, and now she wanted to make sure it was done right. One evening, she stood on the observation deck of Harmonia Prime with Captain Park Do-hyun. They looked out at the stars together. Two beings from different worlds trying to understand each other. "I must ask you something," Mira said. "It has troubled me since you arrived." "Ask. Why did you come back? After everything we did to you, the contempt, the dismissal, the centuries of insults, why did you help us?" Do-hyun was quiet for a long time. He watched a ship pass by the window, its lights blinking against the darkness. "Because you needed us," he said finally. "And we were raised to help those in need, even those who hurt us." Mira shook her head. "That is not an answer. It is madness. No rational species would do what you did." Do-hyun smiled slightly. "Then perhaps we are not entirely rational. Perhaps there is something in us that cares more about doing right than about being right." He turned to look at her. "You asked us to prove ourselves for 300 years. You said we were too violent, too emotional, too unstable. Maybe you were right. Maybe we are all of those things." He paused. "But we are also kind. We are also brave. We are also loyal. And when the darkness comes, we are the ones who stand against it, not because we will win, but because it is right." Mira felt tears in her eyes again. She had cried more in the past week than in the previous century. "Then you are better than we deserved," she said. Do-hyun shook his head. "No. We are just human." He turned back to the window. The stars burned on, cold and distant and eternal. Somewhere among them, new stories were being written, stories of cooperation and hope, of species that had learned to see each other clearly. It would not be easy. There would be setbacks and failures, misunderstandings and conflicts. The galaxy was vast and complicated, and 12,000 years of history could not be undone in a day. But it was a beginning, and sometimes a beginning was enough. On Earth, Admiral Choi Unji stood in her garden and looked up at the night sky. The war was over. The Council was saved. Humanity had shown the galaxy what it was truly capable of. Her daughter came out to join her. "Mother, are you proud of what we did?" Unji thought about the question for a moment. "I am proud that we helped," she said. "I am proud that we did not let anger or hurt stop us from doing what was right. I am proud that we showed them who we really are." She put her arm around her daughter. "But I hope we never have to do it again. I hope they learned. I hope we all learned." Her daughter leaned against her. "What did we learn, Mother?" Unji looked at the stars. That the measure of a species is not in how it treats those who are stronger. It is in how it treats those who are weaker. And that kindness is not weakness. It is the greatest strength of all. She smiled. Remember that, my daughter, and teach it to your children. Above them, the stars went on shining, and somewhere among them, humanity had finally found its place. Not above, not below, but exactly where it had always belonged, home.